Hey, what's up everyone? Mark Price here with DevSlopes.com, and previously on building a really cool navbar. I'm so red and ugly. Will somebody please fix me? And I'm also redistributable. Yay! Well, let's fix it now. That was my soap opera. I should write a script. Anyway, it's ugly and it's red and we want to fix it. Also, we want to add some hover effects onto it. Okay? So, and by the way, if you love red and yellow, bright red, I'm sorry if I've offended you. Okay, so we've got our code here. We're passing in the data. We're passing in the color of the links. We're passing in the title color, and we're passing in the background color. So let's go ahead and fix these to the colors that we actually want. And so for the background color, I don't want red, I actually want white. And just to show you that you can use CSS hex values as normal, we'll put FFF in there. And this time, the title color, we want it to be a nice blue, the blue that you saw in the preview. And so I've got a blue right here. I'm going to paste in 3097D1. And link color, let's not put a link color in for right now. Okay, I'm going to save that, and let's refresh the page. Hey, look at that. Not too bad. I like the border. That's looking good. Also, this background right here, it's white. And the white just, it looks a little bit off. And I find that for some flat looking UIs, a nice super light gray tends to work really well. And so I'm going to show you that we can also have a CSS file for our project in addition to using React. So I'm going to do that now for the whole body. I'm going to make a new file in the CSS folder, and we're going to call this styles.css. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to put the body tag on there, and we're just going to say, click background, fa, fa. Okay, and then let's go ahead and link that in our index.html file. Okay, so we're going to do that right here. Link rel equals style sheet, href equals css/styles.css. Okay, let's make sure this looks good. I'm going to refresh the page. And as you can see, it's slightly grayer, making the white pop out. It looks really nice. I like it. Okay, and I like the way the links look. That's why I took off the color. I like the default looking color. But we've created it in a customizable fashion, so you can change it on your next project. Okay, so that is there. So we want the hover effect to take place. Now, I want you to think about how we're going to do this. You can pause the video and sit and think about how can I use React to make the hover effect on the link icons. What do you think? Well, what we know is that we have access to all of the CSS. You can do everything with CSS and HTML. You can do that all with React, okay? And so I'm thinking we can detect when the mouse is hovering using standard on mouse over, on mouse out, I believe. We can use those standard HTML callback functions or attributes for callback functions to detect when it's hovering. And then we can apply a class, a CSS class conditionally, if that makes any sense. If it doesn't, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So one thing I know for certain is that list items have an active attribute, a CSS style. So if I go to my, what are we looking for here? Nav item. If I say on my nav item right here, if I said class name equals active, okay, let's see what happens. Let's refresh the page. Notice how they're all highlighted now, because obviously each one is active. So that is a default Bootstrap class, style class, and we want that to apply, but only when it's hovering. We don't want it on all of them like this, of course. But I just wanted to show you that the active class is the name of the Bootstrap class that'll make it look like that. And that's what we want to use. But currently, we've got some problems. It's just doing it all the time. So how do we fix this? Well, first I'm going to take this off. Okay, so we need to work with state. Remember actions and such. So what we're going to do is above our render function here, we're going to use get initial state. Okay? And there's no like one way to do this, okay? Here's a principle and rule I want you to ingrain into your brain, okay? React allows you to use logic, programming logic, to build your views, okay? It's not React does X, Y, and Z. That's how you have to do it. It's not some other large framework. All I want you to understand is the principle is you can use code to create your views. So whatever type of logic you can think of with codes, conditionals, if and else statements, whatever you can think of to make it happen, React allows you to do that. And so that's all we're doing here is we're solving a problem with code. Whereas before, with HTML and CSS, you're going to hard code all that in. It's all very static. This makes it a lot more dynamic, which is really cool. I think this is where the styling should live here, is here in the code. That's my personal opinion and experience. So what we want to do is we want to have a property called hover. We need to know if the user's hovering or not, so we can determine if we want to change it to the active class or not. So getInitialState is going to have a property called hover, and by default, it's going to be false. So each of these is going to be false by default, okay? Now, we need to detect when the mouse is hovering over the item. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to do that here on our list item. In fact, I'm going to move this A down, and I'm going to move this here, and I'm going to indent this here because it's going to be a little bit longer. And we're going to say on mouse over. Now, keep in mind that this is a standard HTML attribute that you can pass a callback function into. And React is giving us kind of an override for this. So it's basically using the exact same function that we would use on mouse over. It's allowing us to use that here. So we're going to say on mouse over is going to be this.mouse over. So what we're saying is on mouse over, let's call a function called this.mouse over, which we have not created yet. So let's say mouse over. It's a function. It's going to have the element passed into it, of course. And that looks good to me. And while we're here, why don't we make the other one while we're at it? Mouse out. It's going to be a function like so. Okay, so there's our functions. And so on mouse over, when the mouse is over the list item, let's call this function. Okay, makes sense. And on mouse out, and by the way, this on mouse over and on mouse out, again, I'm not making these up. These are real HTML attributes that will call a function, and React has an implementation of them. We're going to call this dot mouse out. Okay, so we're going to call, when we're hovering, we're going to call this function, and when we go out, we're going to call this function. So what do you think we should do when we're hovering? Well, we should set the state to true. So on mouse over, we're going to say this dot set state, and we're going to say hover equals true. And then, of course, on the opposite here, we're going to say this dot set state hover equals false. Okay, so when we go out, we're going to set hover to false. When we're actually hovering, we're going to set it to true. And the reason why we have to do it this way is because it's a conditionally based style, and so we need our list item to update accordingly based on the functionality. So this is where we'll now see things come into place. Class name, of course, is the CSS class, right? So all we have to do is say this.state.hover, question mark. This is called a ternary operation. Active, otherwise, nothing. If this looks like gibberish to you, that's okay. I'll explain it right now. So this is a ternary operation, and this.state.hover, we're just grabbing the hover, okay? And in JavaScript, when you just grab a variable like this, if it's a Boolean value, or if we're checking if it's empty, it can actually have an expression whether that equates to true or false. In this case, we're saying, is this true? Is this.state.hover true? That's what we're saying here. Is this true? And then you put the question mark. So we're asking the question, is it true? If it is true, then we're going to do this. Otherwise, we're going to do this. So what we're saying is, if hover is on, if it's true, let's apply the active class, that bootstrap class I told you about. Otherwise, if it's not true, let's not apply any class to this. And so, as you can see right here, that's the class name. That's where you set the class. And so that looks good to me. That looks good. Actually, I don't know if there's anything else that I want to do with this. Okay, let's save it. And let's go ahead and refresh the page. And it appears to be working. Okay? Makes sense? So if it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. If it doesn't make sense, just keep moving forward here. I'm going to explain it a little bit more if it doesn't make sense. But what we've done here is we've used the state mechanism for actions in React. Okay? We've used them to detect when the user has is mousing over it, and then we keep a certain state based on the action. So look at this. This is the action. Change the state based on the action. So call this function to change the state. That's what you need to know with React. You make an action, you change the state. Okay? On mouse out, another action, change the state. Are you getting this? And then, here's the cool thing. So you change the state, and then of course, you make your properties and your styling and whatever you want on your components, you make them change according to the state, or you set them based on the state. So if that doesn't make any sense, just keep practicing. We're going to do this a lot. What's really interesting is I've actually taught you most about React. You're like, wait, really? Like, that's it? Yeah, I've kind of taught you most of React, all the base components and things like that. There's a few little properties we haven't talked about, but the majority of what you do with React, we're already doing. So all we're doing now is practicing, getting better at it, figuring out how to use it to solve problems. But anyway, in the end, the rule of thumb here is React allows you to write code to manipulate your views, to write views that are dynamic. And so you can solve problems in one of many, many different ways. And this is how I chose to solve this one certain problem. So I think we solved the ultimate goal here, which was to make the blue, okay, make it look nice. I added the nice border and shadow here. I've got the hover working. And of course, this is awesome. Let's say one day we just wanted to add another value on here. I could just copy this object like so here in main.jsx. And I can make another link here like boom clap. And if I refresh the page, it adds it right there. Of course, if you keep adding it, it's eventually not going to look right, so you got to use trial and error. But enough talking for me. You've done it. Let's go ahead and move on and forward. And remember, to get your free live help, go to devslopes.com and click on chat room. I'm there all the time, as well as a huge community of other students.